Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. You're very welcome to the Scottsdale Big Book Study, where we will study the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Today is the 1st of August, 2026. My name is Audrey Ann, and I am a recovered compulsive overeater from County Meath in Ireland. And I will be your host for today's study. And our co-host today is Maria F., and who will also be our Q&A host. So please join us here in this room every Saturday morning at 7:30 Pacific time, 10:30 Eastern time. And there is also a meeting every Sunday through Friday night from 5:30 Pacific time and 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you have any questions during the meeting, please contact either myself or Maria by private message in the chat function. And the chat function will also be disabled until 5 minutes before the Q&A session. Please note that the speaker, Harlan G., will be recorded for the duration of the study. However, the question and answer sessions which follows will not be recorded. We ask if you can please make sure to keep your microphone on mute at all times during the study, and also please turn off your video if you are exercising, eating, or if you need to step away from your screen for any reason. During the meeting, we will post the link for the seventh edition, and this money goes towards the cost of the Zoom account for uploading of the recordings, and we also send contributions to the intergroup Arizona Serenity in the Desert and World Service Organization. And now I will turn you over to Harlan. Thanks, Harlan.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you very much. 1939, the Big Book rolls off the presses on April the 10th. And for the next 16 years, is it? 1939? Yeah, 16 years to 1955. The bottoms were coming up. The ages were coming down. Things were changing in the world of Alcoholics Anonymous. When the publication came off the presses in 1939, the center of AA life was in Akron and in New York. That was basically it. There were some isolated people in other areas, other places, but basically it was Akron and it was New York. Akron had about 66% of the recoveries. New York had about 33. Why is that? Dr. Bob was a much better sponsor than Bill Wilson. He was more patient, but he also did something Bill didn't always do. He wrote about it in the book, but Bill, when he decided you were going to get sober, damn it, it was full speed ahead. You were going to get sober. Dr. Bob had the good sense to realize if the person doesn't really want this, leave them alone. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your time. Well, things certainly changed in the 16 years between the first edition of the Big Book and the second edition of the Big Book as it was published in 1955. There were many endorsements of the book, Fulton Ausler, Jack Alexander in the Saturday Evening Post. Different things brought intense attention to the world of Alcoholics Anonymous. The demand had been there for thousands of years, but people were naturally very skeptical. People were very, very skeptical. Promises had been made for thousands of years. Go to this church, worship with this reverend, go and take this snake oil, go stand on your head, go jump in the lake, whatever it was. None of those things were any type of relief for alcoholism. It was viewed as a condition of lack of discipline, a condition of weak will, a condition of uncaring. Slovenly people were alcoholics. Lazy people, good-for-nothing people were alcoholics. And then the Big Book came out, and for 16 years, the people that tried to scrutinize Alcoholics Anonymous, such as Jack Alexander, who was an investigative reporter, People who tried to scrutinize Alcoholics Anonymous came to sing its praises. We are not here for your money. We are not here to get you to join a particular religion. We are not here to start a cult. We don't want you to go sell flowers at the airport and shave your head. We don't want any of those things from you. All we ask of you is two things: work the program to the best of your ability, and then pass on what you have learned. Those are the only two things that we ask of anybody who is coming in to a 12-step program. Do what's in front of you to recover, and then please pass on what you have been given. Let's go to page XV in the forward to the second edition. XV is the forward to the second edition as it rests in the fourth edition, which is the edition that I have in front of me. And what we see here in the forward to the second edition is going to be the subject of today's big book study. Figures given in this forward describe the fellowship as it was in 1955. Since the original foreword to this book was written in 1939, a wholesale miracle has taken place. Our earliest printing voiced the hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination. Already continues the early text, 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities. So we have that genesis, we have that beginning, of the spread of the fellowship beyond Brooklyn, beyond New York, beyond Akron. It's starting to happen now. You're starting to get groups in different areas, 16 years have elapsed between our first printing of this book and the presentation in 1955 of our second edition. In that brief space, Alcoholics Anonymous has mushroomed into nearly 6,000 groups whose membership is far above 150,000 recovered alcoholics. Groups are to be found in each of the United States and all of the provinces of Canada. AA has flourishing communities in the British Isles, the Scandinavian countries, South Africa, South America, Mexico, Alaska, Australia, and Hawaii. Remember that Alaska and Hawaii did not become states until 1959. Eisenhower signed that in 1959. All told, promising beginnings have been made in some 50 foreign countries and U.S. possessions. Some are just now taking shape in Asia. Many of our friends encourage us by saying that this is but a beginning, only the augury of a much larger future ahead. So let's just stop right there for just a second and let's take a look at what we see happening in the world that is absolutely miraculous. It's spreading. Is it spreading because AA did such a fantastic job of marketing it? No. Is it spreading because AA did such a fantastic job of convincing people to start meetings? No. It is spreading because it works. For the very first time in human history, we have something that lives up to the hype. Remember, a couple of weeks ago, we studied the title page. And on the title page of Alcoholics Anonymous, we see the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And there's that word recovered. Now in the foreword to the second edition, we see that word again. We see that word recovered. We see that word recovered again because it works. And for the very first time in the history of the world, there is a solution, which was the first chapter written. There is a solution. there is a solution to alcoholism. Notice I'm very carefully avoiding the word cure. There is no cure for alcoholism. There is no cure for this disease. I'm left-handed, throwing, batting. I'm left-handed. There's no cure for, not that I want to, I don't care to change. There's no cure for the fact that I used to have black hair and a lot more of it. So there's no cure for that. There's no cure for the fact I have brown eyes. Now, just as biological as I have brown eyes, just as biological as my hair, just as biological as my height is the fact that I am a compulsive overeater. I was born a compulsive overeater and I will die a compulsive overeater. Now, if I have this disease, which I do, I have two choices. I can die from the disease, like my mother did, which is an ugly, horrible death. My mother died with dialysis shunt that was infected all the time. My mother died after an amputation of her leg from gangrene. My mother died after a lifetime of not being able in any capacity to live up to the person or to become the person, the woman or the human that God intended her to be. And one of the key reasons that she was unable to do that, and I love my mother dearly. She's been gone 50 years. I miss her all the time. But she was unable to do that because when everything got boiled down, it was the disease of compulsive overeating that really hampered her life. It ripped the carpet right out from under her, so to speak. And so I see people dying from the disease and I see people dying with the disease. What's the difference? The people that die with the disease are in recovery. If I die today, which I hope I don't, but if I die today, you can know in your heart, I didn't die from this disease, as every doctor screamed at me as I was a child, and every doctor screamed at my mother and screamed at my father and screamed that I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And doctors have been signing my death warrant from the time I was a child, from the time I was a little boy, they've been signing my death warrant. I remember distinctly, I've told this story in here. I broke my ankle when I was 17 years old, and Dr. Max Bernstein at Edgewater Hospital, now Edgewater Hospital is condos, but if you've ever seen the movie Backdraft, they filmed some of that at Edgewater Hospital in Chicago. But anyway, he screamed at my mother that I'm 17, I'm over 300 pounds, I'm not going to live to see 30. My mother cried, and on the way home, we went for ice cream. The guy behind me, if you can see the guy behind me, is well over 600 pounds. The guy behind me wants to die a lot more than he wanted to live. So there are many, many things. I only have an hour. I would need a lot longer than that to describe the metamorphosis, to describe the unending changes, the panoply of changes that one goes through, from not just the weight. The weight is just the external symptom. What happens to your soul? In Yiddish, it's your neshama, your holiness, your gedarim, your neshama, which is your spirit, which is your holiness. What happens in the soul of a human being from when you transition from I'd love to die, there's no reason for me to be alive, to I want to live, thank you, God, for every day of life. That is a transition that I could not have bridged on my own willpower, on my own human power. You cannot get there. You cannot get there. It is not possible to get there by human aid. Page 43 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the last sentence says, his defense must come from a higher power. There's no more simple way of putting it. Page 43 is very, very distinct. It says, once more, the alcoholic has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. But the spread of the fellowship is occurring because we're not telling you, you must be Catholic, you must be Lutheran, you must be Jewish, you must be Buddhist, whatever it is, or Episcopalian, or whatever it is. We're not telling you that. What we're telling you is you must be willing to believe that there is a power greater than yourself. So we have no prescribed religion, traditions, tradition 6. We don't endorse any religious ideology. We don't endorse anything that's outside of the scope of OA. We don't do that. So as long as I can worship as I see fit, as long as I can worship in my own way, then why would I not want to jump on this? And unfortunately, there are millions and billions that don't want this, but hey, that's okay. We're here, and that's all that really matters. That's all that really counts. All right, I'm still on page XV. I'm at the bottom. The spark, which was that, I'll get it eventually. The spark, there you go, that was to flare into the first AA group was struck at Akron, Ohio in June of 1935 during a talk between a New York stockbroker and an Akron physician. 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience. I'm at XVI. Following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day. He had also been greatly helped by the late William D. Silkworth. We're going to get back to that in a second. A New York specialist in alcoholism who is now accounted no less than a medical saint by AA members, and whose story in the early days of our society appears in the next pages. So we're going to talk about Dr. Silkworth. Just give me a second. From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory, step 4, confession of personality defects, 6 and 7, restitution to those harmed, 8 and 9, helpfulness to others, 12, 10, 11, and 12, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God, 2. So we have a lot here to go over, and we're going to start right now. Actually, the first thing is a mistake. The talk between the Akron doctor, the Akron physician, and the stockbroker occurred in May. It occurred May 12th, 1935, but that's okay. That was Mother's Day of 1935. And on May the 12th, 1935, Dr. Bob Smith, who was a friend of Henrietta Seiberling, came from the Goodyear family, and Bill was in Akron. He arrived in Akron in May, and he was there to take over a company called Akron Tool and Rubber Company, and he was going to be the president of that company, and they do business with Firestone and with Goodyear. The nickname for Akron is Tire Town, Rubber Town, Tire Town. Goodyear is there, and Firestone is there, or was at the time. I don't know about now. But the bottom line is that this was a very important thing. And when Bill saw Seiberling, he thought he was calling the wife of Goodyear. He was calling the daughter-in-law, who was in the process of divorcing her husband. And Dr. Bob had been in contact with the Oxford groups, as Bill had, but Dr. Bob was actually a far more religious person than Bill. He had been in the Oxford groups longer than Bill. And in Akron, Akron is a smaller town. It is not a major metropolitan area. and it is about a half hour by automobile south of Cleveland. It's in northeastern Ohio, and it's right along, that area there in Ohio. And Henry Firestone paid money to have ministers from the Oxford group. The Oxford group people were not concerned with alcoholism. They were concerned with reinstituting enthusiasm. There's a good word, enthusiasm. It comes from two Greek words, entheos, from God. And he had a son, Henry Firestone, had a son that was alcoholic, and he wanted to bring these people from the Oxford group down to Akron, and he paid them extra money to come down. And Henrietta Seiberling was there, and she knew of an alcoholic that would probably be helped by a prayer session or a petition session. Let's petition God to relieve Dr. Bob of his alcoholism. Petition, prayer, I'm using words interchangeably. They mean basically, what I'm talking about is asking God, which is prayer. And Dr. Bob was going to the Oxford group meetings. He was very active. He was a very religious man, but he was drinking the entire way through. Now, Dr. Bob, on May the 12th, through Henrietta Seiberling, she gets this call on May 11th, Saturday. She gets a call from this guy who identifies himself as a rum hound from New York. Now, could you just imagine, most of you are female. You are a female. You get a call from a man you do not know. You get a call from a man no one knows that you know. No one knows this man. And he says he's a rum hound from New York and he needs someone to talk to. You tell this man, come on over to my house. Here's my address. She didn't meet him at Starbucks. She didn't meet him online. She didn't look up his Facebook page. She couldn't do any Google searches on him. He says his name is Bill Wilson. He's from New York. And she says to him, come on over. Here's my address. Why is that? Because in February of 1934, or excuse me, 1935, in February of 1935, they had a big prayer session. And the prayer session was about Dr. Bob. And they were putting their hands on him and they were praying and all this stuff to alleviate Dr. Bob's alcoholism. So she is a woman of faith. And she figures this is God sending this person to heal Dr. Bob. She doesn't know anything about alcoholism. She figures if this guy from New York is healed, he can heal Bob. Come on over. She calls Ann Smith. She gets Ann Smith on the phone and she says, hey, there's a guy coming from New York. He's an alcoholic. He's been cured, which is not true, but he's been, he's a rum hound. He's great. Have Dr. Bob come on over. Ann Smith says to her, tomorrow is Mother's Day. May 12th is Mother's Day. And Dr. Bob bought me a potted plant and he's potted underneath the table. He's unable to go anywhere. He's totally unconscious. I can't make it. So Henrietta Seiberling says, tomorrow's Mother's Day. Have Dr. Bob come on over. I'll have my people make something for dinner and we'll let this man from New York cure Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob doesn't want to go make the call, but he knows Henrietta Seiberling and he knows she's like a damn bulldog. She's not going to let this go. And he says, we're going to make the call. And he says to Ann Smith, Annie, I'm going to give this guy 15 minutes and then you get one of your sick headaches. And Ann agrees. Ann was a good little Al-Anon. She was going to take care of her alcoholic, Dr. Bob and Ann, they were a perfect match, just like Bill and Lois. Lois was the co-founder of Al-Anon, and Ann Smith was a good little Al-Anon. And she said, okay, Bob, we'll take the kids, we'll go over there, and about 15 minutes into the visit, I'm going to get one of my sick headaches. Well, Henrietta Seiberling had a library upstairs in this big gatehouse. And maybe next year, we can't keep putting this off. Next year, what I'm hoping is let's go to Cleveland and let's do like a retreat or something in Cleveland, and then we'll rent a bus. We'll go down to Akron and we'll go to these places, the Cyberling Gatehouse and Dr. Bob's grave and Dr. Bob's house. And there's a gift shop. You can buy a cup. I wish I had mine. I have it I don't have it on my desk. It says I had a drink at Dr. Bob's house, and it shows a little picture of the house. It's cute. It's a little mug, a little ceramic mug. No big deal, but it says I had a drink at Dr. Bob's house. And then you see in the back where Dr. Bob talks about the airing porch where the bootlegger used to leave the liquor. There you are. There it is. And he talks about the cellar where he had the beer. Remember when Dr. Bob tells you the story about how Anne was tricked into letting him have beer when Prohibition started? Well, you're in the cellar. There it is. That's where the beer was. And you see what a modest house it really is. It's really much smaller than what you have in your head. So anyway, so Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson stay up in that library for 6 hours. They get to the Cyberlings at 5 and they come down at 11 p.m. 6 hours. And I'm no whiz at math, but I know 6 when I see it. 6 hours they were up there, and they're coming down the stairs at 11 o'clock at night. And Henrietta Seiberling is probably ready for bed a long time ago, but she wasn't going to upset them. And Ann Smith was probably ready to get the kids home. There was Bob Jr., and then there was Susan. Susan was adopted, and Bob was their son, ready to go home. It was 11 o'clock at night, but neither of these people was going to upset these two people talking. They come down, and Dr. Bob says, this is the first man I've ever talked to that understands my drinking. Now, why is that funny? Why is that weird? Because Bill Wilson never said a word about Bob's drinking. He talked about his drinking, but through identification, Dr. Bob could relate right down the line. And there is a language, the language of the heart. And, Dr. Silkworth, who we're talking about here, Dr. Silkworth says in his famous opinion that in order for the message to be carried, it must have depth and weight. What does that mean? Well, I'll sum it up for you thusly. In order to carry the message of what this is about, you must have the disease and you must have experienced recovery. Otherwise, you are not speaking from any type of knowledge. You're just speaking. I might as well come here and talk about how the Babylonians and the Samaritans lived their lives, and the Phoenicians, ancient history, and Heidelberg man and Cro-Magnon man and all that. But that's just stuff I read in a book. I've never been a Phoenician. I don't think they would accept Jewish members, but I've never been a Babylonian. I've never been, any of these things. So, but I have been a compulsive overeater since the day I was born, and I still am. And I have been in recovery for the last 27 and a half years. And I've had moments or months or years of recovery before I relapsed, hopefully that last time. So Bill and Bob speak the language of the heart, because they are alcoholics. They understand each other as no one does. There are things you see. There are things you experience. There are things we know about bulimia. There are things we know about anorexia. There are things we know about what it's like to drive a car and have the steering wheel jabbing you constantly. I didn't used to drool. That's like a later development here. My advice to you is stay young. If you're young, stay young. I'm sitting here and I'm like, where is this coming from? But anyway, too many birthdays. But the bottom line is that we have a situation where these two people struck a spark. And that spark carried over to the entire world. the entire world. Remember, I told you there's a poster when I was young, very young in OA. It said, Dr. Jung told Roland, Roland told Ebby, Ebby told Bill, Bill told the world. Now we're talking about Silkworth, and Silkworth told Bill, and Bill told Bob, and Bill wrote the book with God's guidance. I don't believe Bill wrote the book. I believe, as Moses did, he wrote it down, but he didn't write the book. I believe, this is my belief, I don't have any evidence to back it up except my brain. This book was written by God Almighty. How else could it have been so effective? And how could it have been the most unbelievable spiritual book written in the last 5,000 years? How in the world could that or 2,000 years, whatever? How in the world else could this be so effective? Well, I believe God wrote it. But anyway, that's for another time. But Dr. Silkworth, his opinion, or his, not just his opinion, but his existence is key. Now, I talked about Dr. Silkworth last week. I'm going to talk about him again at the risk of being repetitive. If it were not for Dr. William Duncan Silkworth, there is no book and there is no program. There's nothing. Nothing would make any sense to you at all whatsoever. We're going to sit here and talk about treating alcoholism, but we don't know what alcoholism is. And if it wasn't for Dr. Silkworth, maybe somebody would have stumbled upon it at some point. Maybe, I don't know. But Dr. William Duncan Silkworth absolutely defined addiction. I'm not using the word alcoholism because it's compulsive eating, it's love addiction, it's gambling, it's drug addiction, it's sex addiction. And yes, sex and love addiction are different. It's internet addiction, it's anything you could possibly name. Shopping addiction. What Dr. Silkworth boiled it down to is this. He used his experience as the medical director at Towns Hospital in New York City, which at that time in the 1930s had been established years previous as the preeminent hospital for the treatment of drug addiction and alcoholism. And he treated 40,000 patients. And as he was doing that, he came up with a hypothesis. He was a neuropsychologist. He was a neurologist. He had a very strong interest in psychiatry. He was, as I say, a neuropsychiatrist, but he was primarily a neurologist. But through observation, Dr. Silkworth, who was born in Brooklyn, he died at the Towns Hospital in 1951, but he said, this is an allergy of the body. And he cited this in his opinion, and never before in the history of Earth had there been anybody who put a physical component into the definition of alcoholism. Prior to this, it was thought of as a weak will condition, lack of discipline, lack of willpower, lack of trying, uncaring, evil, non-religious, whatever. And he said, this is essentially an allergy, that alcoholics are set aside from normal drinkers by an actual physical craving for more of the same. And he cited this allergy in his famous opinion. So Dr. Silkworth comes up with that part of it. He also, and the 11 steps after step 1 are going to treat this part of it. The only step that addresses the physical allergy is the first half of step 1. That's it. Then we're done with it. But in the next 10 or 11 and a half steps, we are going to treat the mind. Now, what is different about the mind of an alcoholic? The mind of an alcoholic, compulsive overeater, love addict, sex addict, gambler, drug addict, internet addict, shopaholic, you name it, cigarette addict, whatever it is, that alcohol is doing something for the alcoholic that nobody else feels. And that is, it gives us this instant effect. He will write in 1937 that alcoholics drink because they like the effect produced by alcohol. He's already told us about the physical allergy, and he will write in his famous opinion, he will write that any description of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. That there is, and Yale University in the 1950s, after he died in 51, and the 60s, Yale University had their alcoholic studies program. They've since discontinued it, unfortunately. But Yale University, in their laboratories, proved that Dr. Silkworth's theory is 100% scientifically correct. That he says, we drink because we like the effect produced by alcohol. What is that effect? That effect is that sense of ease and comfort that comes instantly when we drink alcohol or eat Almond Joys. I eat an Almond Joy. My mouth, before I got old and started drooling, my mouth would be salivating. I could feel the blood rushing through my head, and I haven't even gotten it out of the package yet. I just bought it. I just got it out of the store. Sometimes I couldn't even wait to get it out of the store. I had to do it in the store. I have passed thousands of empty candy wrappers through the grocery store because I couldn't wait to eat the candy. But I don't even have it in my mouth yet. And I'm going crazy because I know that this Almond Joy is going to just make me feel fantastic. And this effect, this sense of ease and comfort, is something only we feel. Regular eaters do not get a sense of ease and comfort like we do from eating Almond Joy or whatever it is that floats your boat. Ice cream, pizza, French fries, whatever that may be. They simply do not feel that. Our minds are out to destroy our bodies, and our bodies are out to destroy our minds. We have a mind that is destructive. We have a body that is destructive, and we are checkmated by an illness that most of us will live and die and not even know we have. But Dr. Silkworth, in his infinite wisdom, gave us the knowledge that this is what you have, but he didn't have a solution for it. He only cited the problem. He did not know there was any solution. And Dr. Silkworth later on will see people recovering, and he will write that we need a power greater than ourselves. But at the time that AA was getting started, it had to be Dr. Jung in Switzerland, Geneva, Switzerland, that says to Roland, Roland will tell Ebby, Ebby will tell Bill, Bill will tell the world of the spiritual experience that can alter your thoughts, your actions, your attitudes. But Dr. Silkworth is the major player at the very beginning because he will tell Bill Wilson right before Bill goes to Akron to stop preaching about God to these alcoholics. You have to tell them what I told you. You have to tell them of the allergy of the body. You have to tell them of the twist of the mind. The obsession of the mind is 12 and 12 language. The big book doesn't use obsession of the mind. It uses mental twist and mental blank spot, which is the built-in forgetter. So Dr. Silkworth talks to Bill, and Bill tries this new method of explaining the allergy and explaining the twist of the mind, armed with the information of the spiritual recovery from Ebby. He now has the nexus. He has this nexus, this confluence, this putting together in this one person, Bill Wilson. He has the problem from Silkworth, a physician, and he has the solution from a psychiatrist, also a physician in Switzerland, of the recovery. So when Bill says on page 12, I saw, what did he see? He saw recovery in the face of Ebby Thatcher. He saw recovery in Ebby's face. Bill had been hospitalized twice previous to this, and he saw heavy drinkers, moderate drinkers, and alcoholics not drinking, but the alcoholics were miserable when they were not drinking. Miserable. And he saw in Ebby that Ebby was happy in his release. He says, I saw. He says, I felt. What did he feel? Hope. That for the first time in Bill's life, Bill starts drinking in 1917. This is 1934. This is November of 34. So it's 17 years. In his meeting with Ebby, he says, I saw recovery. I felt hope. And what did he believe? He says, I saw, I believed. He says, I saw. And then he says at the end, I believed. What did he believe? That God could and would if God were sought. I saw, I thought, I hoped. So these are the things that turned out to be the ABCs. After step 12, the ABCs on page 60, that we were alcoholics and could not manage our own lives, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, and then see God could and would if he were sought. So this is extremely important information. Without this information from the late William D. Silkworth, because he died in 51, the book was written in 55, Jung will not pass until the early 60s, and we're going to get into the letters, not today, we're going to get into the letters at the end of Jung's life between Bill Wilson and Dr. Jung. We're not going to get into that today, but we are going to examine those letters. We're going to see how Bill writes him and says, thank you. And Dr. Jung says, whatever happened to Roland H? I lost touch with him. I don't know. And Bill really doesn't know either. But we're going to get into that at some point, but not today. And he says here, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory. That's our step 4. Confession of personality defects, 6 and 7. Restitution or confession could also partly be 5 too. Yeah, 5, 6, and 7, not just 6 and 7, 5, 6, and 7. Restitution to those harms. Remember that restitution is Oxford group language and amends is AA language. Oxford groupers didn't make amends. They made restitution. It's the same thing. It's just a different word. And AAs make amends, Oxford restitution. Helpfulness to others, 10, 11, and 12, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. Very, very key. And where does the emanation point come from? It comes from Dr. Silkworth. That's why Bill mentions him in the foreword to the first edition. He mentions him in the foreword to the second edition. Bill is very indebted to Silkworth, as we all are. Again, before we leave this paragraph, without Dr. Silkworth, there is no program. Nothing is going to make sense until you know what the problem is. What if I said to you, fill it up with air and keep driving? You don't even know what I'm talking about. What if your tire is out of air? I feel like I'm playing Jeopardy here. I'm giving you the answer and then I give you the question. So if you fill it up with air and then you go, all right, what's the question? Well, what do I do if my bicycle tire or my car tire is out of air? Not if it has a hole, but if it's just out of air, fill it up with air. But if you don't know that the tire is out of air, that doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. So Silkworth is, again, our great medical benefactor. Silkworth, in my opinion, also could have very easily been considered a co-founder of AA. Very easily considered a co-founder of AA. Very easily. Page XVI. I'm almost out of breath, so you guys are going to luck out today. All right. Prior to his journey in Akron, I'm in the middle of XVI. Prior to his journey to Akron, the broker had worked hard with many alcoholics on the theory that only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic. Very true. He wasn't quite there yet, but he was on his way. But he had succeeded only in keeping him sober himself. The broker had collapsed, leaving him greatly in fear that he might start drinking again. He suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. That alcoholic turned out to be the Akron physician. Bill wasn't really a broker. It doesn't really matter, but I'll just get this out of the closet. Bill was not a stockbroker. He calls himself one because he knows if he tried to explain what he really was, many wouldn't understand it. But stockbroker, we understand. What he was a New York City stock speculator. Today, he'd be called an investment counselor or a day trader and counselor. He advised people as to what to or what not to invest in based on his opinions. He was not really a stockbroker, but let's not figure out. Let's tell you what happened. I already think I told you, but it's 1935. Bill got sober on December the 14th. He works the steps. He got sober on the 11th or the 12th and the 13th. He comes into the town's hospital waving a bottle of gin on the evening of the 11th of December, 1934. And he's yelling at Dr. Silkworth in the hall of a hospital, "I have found something." A lot of alcoholics get very loud when they're drunk because alcohol affects the hearing. It diminishes the hearing. And that's why a lot of these guys yell like that. And he says, "I have found something." And he's waving a bottle of gin. And Dr. Silkworth says to Bill Wilson, "Yes, it seems you have. Go upstairs, get your clothes off, get into bed, put on a gown, go into bed, and I'll be up to see you in just a little bit." Now, this is the evening, and Dr. Silkworth is still there attending patients. Goes upstairs, and Bill Wilson is drunk. And what Bill is trying to explain to him is he's been to the Oxford group meetings, but he's too drunk to really articulate that. Silkworth gives him some medicine, and Bill sleeps through the night. And then the next day is the 12th and then the 13th. Bill dried out for 2 days. Bill Dotson dried out for 2 days. Is this starting to sound familiar? Why we let you sit for 2 days and then we start working the steps? It is to me. I hope it is to you. On the 14th of December, Bill Wilson will work what we know today are the first 11 steps of AA. On the 14th of December, 15th of December, he will work what we know today as step 12, and he will have on the morning of the 15th his spiritual experience. So he goes out there and he tries to sober up the world. He had lots of good enthusiasm and theos from God. He's got lots of enthusiasm. He's pulling these guys off the bar stools and he's yanking these guys out of the gutter and he's taking them to the Oxford group meetings and they didn't want to go. Well, the only one he kept sober was himself. But in the period of time right before Akron, this would be late April of 35. They're going to the Oxford group meeting, and Bill Wilson comes in and he sees Lois getting ready for the meeting. And he says, "This is not working." And he says, "Lo, I really felt that God was giving me a signal to sober up drunks, and it doesn't seem to be working." Lois turned to him and changed the course of the world when she said to him, "But you're staying sober." Wow, what a concept. For the very first time in his adult life, he started drinking in 1917. This was April of 1935. He is now sober for 4.5 months. Wow, it hit him like a truck. And she says to him, "Why don't you go see Dr. Silkworth tomorrow before you leave for Akron and go see him?" And Silkworth says to him, "You've got to stop preaching God to these drunks. You've got to tell them what I told you. Tell them of the hopeless feature of the allergy and the hopeless nature of the twist of the mind. Tell them without this spiritual conversion," because by then he was aware of it, "without this, they are doomed and they will not recover." And the very first person that Bill will change his approach on, the very first person that he will do this with, is Dr. Robert Smith of Akron, Ohio. And the rest, as they say, is history. Let's go back to page XVI. The physician had repeatedly tried, this physician, Dr. Bob, had repeatedly tried, not Silkworth, Bob, had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. Why was that? Two reasons. Number one, he didn't take any action. He would sit there and pray and pray and pray, but he wasn't taking any action. What else did Dr. Bob not know? Even though he was a physician, he didn't know about the allergy of the body. He didn't know about the twist in the mind, and he kept drinking, hoping that this obsession with alcohol would go away. And as long as you keep eating Almond Joy bars, as long as you keep eating French fries and pizza and all this chazarai, you are going to continue to consume these foods because you have an actual allergy craving for more of the same. Okay. So but when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description, there again, the vital importance of Silkworth description of alcoholism. What was the description of alcoholism? Allergy, twist of the mind. And its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. He sobered never to drink again up to the moment of his death in 1950. This seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another as no non-alcoholic could. That's why those doctors that screamed at me when I was a kid, those doctors that screamed and hollered at me and put me on amphetamines could not help me. But you can help me where they can't. And they're doctors. Now, if I have a strep throat, I'm not coming to you. When I needed a hip replacement or a knee replacement, I'm not coming to you. Unless you're an orthopedic surgeon, then I might. But when I did was I didn't just go to the meeting and say, gosh, I need my hip replaced. Gosh, I need my knee replaced, whatever. I went to an orthopedic surgeon. And the orthopedic surgeon says, yes, you do. We'll take x-rays. Yeah, it's confirmed. You're bone on bone. And he scheduled me for surgery. So there's a time to consult a physician. There's a time to consult whatever. And then there's a time to consult the people within AA. Render unto God what is God's. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. This cannot be a unilateral solution to all human ills. If I did that, I'd be in trouble. When I need groceries, I go to the grocery store. You get the idea. It's also, I'm at the top of XVI. It also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. And yet I have people calling me all the time. I'm not going to sponsor. I don't know enough. I'm not perfect. What if I hurt them? You don't sponsor, you're going to die. My friend in New Jersey, I have a friend of mine, lives in New Jersey, lives right near Cherry Hill. And she would tell you, you're afraid to sponsor. You better be afraid not to sponsor because this is a 12-step program, not an 11-step program. You don't sponsor, you don't recover. No ifs, no ands, no buts. XVI, Hence, the two men set to work frantically upon alcoholics arriving in the ward of Akron City Hospital. Their very first case, a desperate one, recovered immediately and became alcoholics number 3. Now, this is not really the case. They actually visited a couple of people before contacting Bill Dotson. AA number 3 is Bill Dotson. There's no B in Dotson. 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 There's no B in there. So Dr. Bob and Bill went to Bill Dotson's room, and he had a very thick Kentucky accent. And there are tapes of him that are hard to listen to. Thick Kentucky accent. You couldn't cut it with a chainsaw. He says, "Mama, I saw these two fellers coming in my room, and I didn't know whether they was undertakers or what they was. Well, I didn't know what the heck they was, but man, they started telling me about their drinking. I says, man, I drink like that." And he talks about it, and it's hard to hear because it's the recordings are so bad. But he had this very thick accent. But there was another doctor, and there was another one that they tried to give the program to, but the people didn't want it. But Bill Dotson remained sober for the rest of his life, and he died in 1954. And he was a rampart of recovery, very steady, a very service-oriented person, very religious person. He engaged in a political election. He was running for office. His alcoholism, he was very new in recovery at that time. His alcoholism was used against him in the election. He lost the election by a very narrow margin, and it did not force him to go back into the drinking. He remained sober for the rest of his life. Dotson, Bill Dotson. Okay. He never had another drink. This work at Akron continued through the summer of 1935. There were many failures, but there was an occasional heartening success. When the broker returned to New York in the fall of 1935, the first AA group had actually been formed, though no one realized it at the time. And this was the group in Akron, Ohio. And you had Eddie R. Eddie R. was one of their failures. Eddie got sober, and then he wasn't sober. And he was, he came to Dr. Bob's funeral. Dr. Bob died in 1950, and he came to Dr. Bob's funeral with 1 year of sobriety, and he knew that would please Dr. Bob very, very much. But Bill Dotson remained sober. Eddie R. did not. He got drunk and sober and drunk and sober, and there were other failures as well. So they were on their way, and then Bill goes back to New York and, tries to sober up some people there. But the bottom line is you have a situation that you now knew that Bill working with Bob was not a fluke. What did Bill Dotson do? He proved that this method was successful by staying sober. They knew they were onto something. They knew they had something that was workable. Now, XVII, a second small group promptly took shape at New York, to be followed in 1937 with the start of a third at Cleveland. So Cleveland's got a group, Akron's got a group, and New York has a group. Besides these, there were scattered alcoholics who had picked up the basic ideas in Akron or New York, who were trying to form groups in other cities. Archie Throwbridge would start AA in Detroit. And then there was Fitz Mayo, who started it in Baltimore and Washington. And you had Treat, Earl T. He started the most important group ever. It was the one in Chicago. We're the most important city of any city in the world. And if it doesn't start in Chicago, who cares about it then? No one cares. So if it doesn't start in Chicago, then I don't get, I wouldn't get what I got and, whatever. But Earl T. and Sylvia Kaufman came in from Evanston, and AA was on its way in the most important city in the world, Chicago, Illinois. By late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety time behind them was sufficient to convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. It was now time the struggling groups thought to place their message and unique experience before the world. This determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. In other words, they decided three things. Only one of those things happened, and it was the publication of the book. The three things that they wanted to do: they wanted to start a chain of hospitals, because you could hardly get an alcoholic in a hospital at that time. Doctors had to lie and write gastritis and write all kinds of other lies in there. And that didn't happen. And they were going to have paid missionaries going hither and yon throughout the country, proselytizing AA. Thank God that didn't happen. The membership had then reached about 100 men and women. The fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous, from the title of its own book. The flying blind period ended, and the AA entered a new phase of its pioneering time. Okay, we're going to stop now. We're going to open it up. But what I'm going to remind you of is next weekend, I want